You'd think a place that looks like a postcard would feel like home. That's what Daniel believed when he first moved into the Lakeside Grove community. Quiet streets, neat sidewalks, lawns trimmed like they were measured with rulers. Everything gave off that calm, suburban charm. Daniel wasn't looking for perfection. He just wanted a safe, peaceful space for his daughter, Lily. At 10 years old, she'd already lived through a trauma that would shatter most adults. A car accident, the kind that happens in seconds but changes everything forever, had left her paralyzed from the waist down. Her legs didn't work anymore. Her freedom, her childhood mobility, all gone in a flash. But Daniel made a promise to her that day in the hospital. Holding her fragile hand, he whispered, "We'll find you a new kind of freedom. I swear it." 2 months later, they moved into a modest house that backed right onto a private lake. There was no giant driveway, no luxurious kitchen, but there was that lake, still blue, open. It reminded Daniel of the way the world looked to Lily now. Quiet, uncertain, but maybe, just maybe, full of possibility. Daniel didn't waste time. The moment they unpacked boxes, he got to work building a small wooden rowboat. Nothing fancy. He didn't have experience with boats, but he had love. He sanded it carefully, made it smooth, painted the trim white with Lily's favorite color, lavender, along the edges. He named it the Float. Lily watched from her wheelchair with wide eyes. The day it was finished, he rolled her down the new ramp he'd built out to the dock, lifted her into the boat gently, and handed her a small watercolor set. "This is yours now," he said. "You can go wherever your heart wants from here." She didn't speak right away. She dipped the brush in blue paint and looked out over the water. Then, a small smile crept onto her face. "I feel like I'm flying," she whispered. From that moment, the boat became her haven. Every afternoon, she painted. Scenes of birds, trees, clouds, dreams. The water gave her something no therapy ever had: peace. Freedom. Daniel would sit on the porch, sipping coffee, sometimes fixing small things in the backyard. Watching her was like watching light slowly return to a place that had been dark for far too long. Neighbors noticed too. Most smiled as they passed by. A few even waved or came over to say hello. Cookies were dropped off, some offered to help them settle in. It felt warm at first. But one person never smiled, never waved. Across the street lived a woman named Karen. She stood on her porch often, arms crossed, holding a clipboard like it was a sword. Her graying blonde hair was always tied tightly. Her expression, permanently unimpressed. It didn't take long for Daniel to realize. Karen was the president of the HOA. He tried to be neighborly. Gave her a wave the first week. She didn't wave back. She just looked at the boat. Then at Lily. Then scribbled something on her clipboard. Lily noticed. "Daddy, that lady keeps staring at me." "She's probably just not used to kids," Daniel offered gently, not wanting to scare her. But he was wrong. Karen wasn't just watching. She was judging, planning, targeting. And neither Daniel nor Lily had any idea how far she was willing to go. It started small, as these things often do. A printed notice, folded neatly and tucked under Daniel's front door. No envelope. No name. Just the HOA letterhead at the top. Notice of noncompliance, unregistered watercraft. Daniel chuckled softly when he read it. There was no engine, no registration number, not even a motor on the little rowboat. It was a floating canoe, handmade with care, and used by a 10-year-old girl to paint. He figured it was probably a clerical error. So, he brought it up politely at the next HOA meeting. It was a small gathering of about a dozen neighbors seated on folding chairs in the local rec room. Cookies and lemonade on the side table. It looked innocent enough, until Karen stood up at the front with that clipboard in her hands. Daniel waited for his turn, then raised his hand. "Hi, I'm Daniel. New on Elmwood Lane. I received a note about a watercraft." Before he could finish, Karen cut in, her voice flat and sharp like a blade. "Yes, I sent that. You're in violation of Section 7, Article 14, unauthorized water vessels on community property." Daniel blinked. "The lake is behind my house. That section is private land, isn't it?" Karen's lips curled into a tight, unpleasant smile. The water connects to HOA-managed access points. That includes usage. We can't have everyone putting homemade contraptions out there. It's a safety hazard. A few people shifted in their seats. Daniel noticed a man at the back roll his eyes slightly, as if this wasn't the first time Karen made a mountain out of nothing. Still, Daniel stayed calm. It's just a small boat. My daughter, she's in a wheelchair. She uses it to paint. It brings her peace. It doesn't go far. It stays close to our dock. Karen didn't blink. Rules are rules. I don't make them. I just enforce them. He could feel the heat rise in his chest, but he held it back. I'm happy to work with the board to find a solution. Karen's voice rose over his. If the vessel isn't removed in 7 days, you'll be fined $100 per day of continued violation. This meeting is adjourned. She slapped the clipboard against her thigh and walked out without another word. Daniel stood there for a moment, stunned. No one else spoke. A few offered awkward glances his way. One older woman leaned in to whisper, "Don't take it personal. She's always like that." Back home, Daniel sat on the edge of the porch, watching Lily in her boat again. She was giggling, painting a tiny duck that had floated past. She had no idea that her joy was considered a violation. How could he tell her that some grown-up bully was trying to take it away? He didn't tell her that night. Instead, he picked up the phone and started researching local zoning laws. Daniel wasn't just any father. He had training most people didn't know about. The years he'd spent in the fire department, climbing ranks. He'd read more legal codes and safety regulations than Karen could dream of. The next morning, he left a calm, professional letter in the HOA Dropbox. Attached were copies of the deed to his home, a map of the property lines, and highlighted sections of the community charter that clearly stated the rear lake docks were not managed by the HOA. But he knew Karen wouldn't back down easily. And he was right. 2 days later, Lily's art supplies went missing. Her easel, her brushes, even her canvas. Daniel found them tossed behind a bush near the community tennis court, damp from the sprinklers. He asked around. No one saw anything. Then came another letter. This time not from the HOA, but from the County Code Enforcement Office. An anonymous tip had been filed accusing Daniel of illegal dumping into the lake. It was a serious claim. He spent 2 hours on the phone proving there was no such thing happening. No evidence. No concern. Daniel started locking the backyard gate. He installed a motion light near the dock. He didn't want to scare Lily, but his instincts were on high alert. Still, Lily remained unaware. And happy. Every day she asked, "Can I go out in the float, Daddy?" And every day he smiled. "Of course, sweetheart." But the unease grew heavier. Karen had made her point clear. She didn't like the boat. She didn't like seeing it on the water. And she especially didn't like being challenged. What Daniel didn't know yet was just how far she was willing to go to win. And what she didn't know was who she was actually dealing with. It was a quiet Saturday night. The kind where the air feels just cool enough to keep the windows open, and the moonlight dances gently across the lake like it's trying to sing a lullaby. Daniel was inside, washing dishes. The radio played low in the background. Lily had fallen asleep early after a long afternoon painting a sunflower scene. The float was tied to the dock, swaying softly in the water like a sleeping dog. Everything felt safe. Until the motion light in the backyard flickered on. Daniel glanced out the kitchen window instinctively. At first, nothing seemed out of place. But then his eyes caught something strange. A silhouette. A person, hood up, crouching by the dock. He froze. His training kicked in. He flicked off the kitchen lights and moved quickly to the sliding door. Quiet. Calm. Calculated. As he stepped onto the porch, he caught the sound, a faint splash, and the flick of a lighter. Then he saw it. A small fire had ignited on the back end of the boat, near the canvas Lily had left inside. The flames licked up the side of the boat rapidly. Whoever the figure was, they darted off down the side path and disappeared into the trees between the yards. Daniel ran. Fast. His heart thudded in his chest like a war drum. "Lily!" he shouted without thinking. She was in her room, fast asleep, thank God. But the boat, her boat, was burning. The water reflected orange and red as the wooden trim caught quickly. The flames spread, flickering hungrily like they knew what they were destroying. Daniel didn't hesitate. He ran to the shed, pulled out a fire blanket and extinguisher, and bolted down the ramp. He jumped onto the dock, kicked off his shoes, and waded into the shallow edge. The boat had drifted just a foot from the platform, still tied but floating at a tilt as the heat warped its frame. He launched the blanket over the top of the fire and blasted it with the extinguisher. White foam sprayed across the flames. Smoke poured up. Coughing, he smothered the last few embers with his hands inside the heavy fireproof gloves. It was over in less than 5 minutes. But the boat, it was ruined. The lavender paint was charred. The trim had split. Her art supplies were blackened, some melted into a pool of colorless plastic. The sunflower canvas was gone, turned to ash. Daniel stood there in the water, soaked, eyes burning from the smoke, chest heaving. His fists clenched. This wasn't vandalism. This was hate. This was cruelty. And someone had done it while his daughter slept. His mind turned sharply. Security cameras. Motion light. Maybe one of the neighbors saw something. He marched back up the ramp, dripping wet, grabbed his phone, and dialed the police. 911, what's your emergency? I need to report arson. Someone set fire to a boat in my backyard while my disabled daughter was inside the house. This was deliberate. Are you safe now, sir? Yes. Fire's out. I'm former fire marshal. I handled the flames. But I need officers here to file a report. And I think I know who did this. When the officer arrived 20 minutes later, Daniel had already changed into dry clothes. He walked them through the backyard, showed them the remains of the boat, and gave them the story, including every detail about Karen's harassment. He pointed to the path where the figure had escaped. The officer took notes, photographed the damage, and nodded slowly. Sir, he said, we'll file this as suspected arson. But do you have any proof this neighbor did it? Daniel took a breath. Not yet. But give me 1 day. That night, he stayed up reviewing the motion sensor camera footage from the backyard. And there it was. 9:16 p.m. A tall figure in a black hoodie, moving with purpose. They didn't run. They didn't sneak. They walked straight to the boat like they knew exactly where it was. Daniel zoomed in, frame by frame. At one point, as the figure bent over, the hood slipped slightly off one shoulder, revealing a wavy line of graying blonde hair. It was her, Karen. And he knew exactly what to do next. By morning, Daniel had a plan. Not a revenge plan. A justice plan. He had worn a badge for 20 years. He had led fire investigations in 3 counties. He had trained arson teams. He had stood in courtrooms and testified in front of judges. He didn't need to scream. He didn't need to threaten. He just needed to build his case. First, he made 3 copies of the security footage, one for the police, one for the HOA board, and one for himself. Second, he called an old friend, Lieutenant Marcus Langley, currently active in the arson division at the county fire marshal's office. Marcus picked up on the second ring. Danny boy. Long time. What's up? Daniel's voice was steady. I've got an arson case. Backyard boat fire. My daughter's. There was a pause. You okay? Yeah. I handled it. But I know who did it. I need your help verifying chain of custody on the footage. And I need a witness when I confront her. You got it. Send me the files. I'll be there at 3. Daniel spent the rest of the morning repairing the charred dock and calming Lily, who had noticed her boat was missing. Is it broken? She asked, eyes wide with worry. He knelt down, brushed her blonde hair back gently, and smiled. A little. But we'll make a new one. Better. Bigger. She nodded, but her lip trembled. I loved the float. I know, sweetheart. Some people don't understand how special it was. But I do. By mid-afternoon, Marcus arrived. They shook hands in the driveway like 2 brothers reunited. You got your badge? Daniel asked. Marcus patted his jacket. Right here. And you brought the fire department forms? Marcus held up a folder. Official as it gets. Good. Let's go talk to Karen. They didn't need to knock. Karen was outside, as if she knew something was coming. She stood in her driveway, pruning her roses with unnecessary aggression. Her lips pursed tight. She looked up as they approached. Well, well. Morning, gentlemen, she said coldly. Daniel kept his tone calm. Karen, we'd like a word. This is Lieutenant Langley from the County Fire Marshal's office. Karen's eyes flicked to the badge. What's this about? Marcus spoke clearly. There was a suspected arson last night on Mr. Daniel's property. We've obtained security footage. You were recorded entering his backyard and igniting the boat. Karen blinked. For just a second, she was caught off guard. I don't know what you're talking about, she said quickly. I was home all night. Daniel held up a printed still frame. It showed her hooded figure, partial profile visible. Her long blonde hair slipping down. This was taken at 9:16 p.m., he said. We've verified the timestamp. The camera's chain of custody is intact. You entered my yard. You lit the boat on fire. You put my daughter at risk. Karen scoffed. This is ridiculous. I was trimming hedges. You can't prove anything. Marcus stepped forward. Ma'am, your statement is now on record. If you'd like to formally deny involvement, we'll proceed to forensic analysis of your clothing for accelerant residue. And we've already requested surveillance from other homes facing your path of escape. Karen's face turned red. I was just trying to get rid of a hazard. A hazard? Daniel said, his voice rising slightly. My daughter's boat? A hand-built, stationary float used for therapy and painting? That was your idea of a fire risk. Karen crossed her arms. It was ugly. And it didn't belong there. The HOA has standards. And now you've committed felony arson, Marcus cut in. Which, if confirmed, carries up to 10 years in prison. That's not a homeowners association issue. That's a criminal court issue. Karen paled. Daniel leaned in slightly, his tone low but unshakable. You came into my property. You set fire to something precious to my daughter. And you didn't know who you were dealing with. I'm a retired fire marshal. I've put away people for half the offense you just committed. You messed with the wrong family. Karen took a step back. I didn't mean to. I thought, she stammered. You thought you were above the rules, Marcus said. But you're not. Consider this your formal notice. We're submitting everything to the county prosecutor. Karen opened her mouth, but no words came. Daniel took one last look at her. You tried to destroy something because you didn't like how it looked. But it meant everything to Lily. And you didn't even care. He turned and walked away. She didn't follow. That evening, Marcus helped Daniel fill out the official fire incident report. Together, they submitted it to the prosecutor's office. The HOA board was also informed, and several members expressed their shock. Quietly, 2 of them admitted they were tired of Karen's behavior but had been too intimidated to challenge her. Now they had no excuse. Karen had crossed a line. And this time, there were real consequences. By the next morning, the neighborhood was buzzing. Whispers turned to questions. Questions turned to rumors. And soon, the story wasn't just about a boat, it was about what Karen had done. Daniel hadn't planned to tell everyone. But someone on the HOA board had seen the footage. Someone who'd been quiet for years. Someone tired of Karen's grip on the neighborhood. That person shared the footage privately with a few others. And in a matter of hours, a silent chain reaction had started. By Sunday afternoon, Daniel was standing on his front lawn repairing part of the dock railing when Mr. and Mrs. Gallagher from across the street walked over. They were an older couple, quiet, polite, never involved in HOA politics. Daniel, Mr. Gallagher said gently, we heard what happened. Is it true? Karen set fire to Lily's boat. Daniel looked up, wiping sweat from his forehead. Yes, it's true. She could have killed someone, Mrs. Gallagher said, her voice shaking. I mean, your daughter. She was asleep inside, Daniel said. But that doesn't make it less serious. Mr. Gallagher frowned. This has gone too far. First it was garden complaints. Then letters about mailbox height. Now this. We don't want someone like that representing our neighborhood. You're not the only ones, Daniel said. Later that day, as he walked Lily down to the lake in her wheelchair, he noticed something remarkable. Neighbors, people he barely spoke to, waved. Some came over and offered condolences. A few even brought fresh cookies and small gifts for Lily. One woman, Sarah, who lived 2 doors down, handed Daniel an envelope. Inside was a hand-drawn card from her son with crayon hearts and the words, "Sorry your boat burned. We liked it." Daniel almost choked up. The community was changing. Not just reacting, but uniting. That evening, the HOA board called an emergency meeting, something they hadn't done in over 5 years. Daniel was invited, along with Marcus as an official observer. The meeting was held in the local recreation center. A dozen chairs were set up, but over 30 people came. Some stood against the walls. Others sat on the floor. At the front sat Karen, her arms crossed, eyes defiant. But there was something different about her now. Her confidence had cracked. The HOA president, Mr. Beltran, stood and cleared his throat. This emergency session was called following an incident of suspected arson involving one of our community members. We have reviewed security footage provided by Mr. Daniels. A copy has also been submitted to local authorities. He paused. We cannot ignore what happened. And we cannot allow personal grievances to escalate into violence. That boat, while technically outside HOA regulations, was not a danger to anyone. It was used for a child's therapy. Daniel stood when invited. He kept his words simple. For years, I've watched as one person tried to control everyone through threats and petty complaints. My daughter's float was never about rebellion. It was about healing. About giving her a space to smile again. He held up a photo, Lily sitting on the boat, laughing, a paintbrush in her hand, sunflowers around her. This is what was destroyed. And no matter what the rules say, no child deserves that. There was silence. Then applause. Quiet at first. Then rising. Karen stood abruptly. This is a witch hunt. Mr. Beltran raised a hand. Enough. Karen, based on what we've seen and the formal complaint filed, the board is moving to suspend your authority until further investigation. You are relieved of all HOA responsibilities effective immediately. Karen's mouth dropped open. You can't do that. Marcus stepped forward. Actually, they can. And since criminal charges are pending, you may want to consult legal counsel. She stormed out without another word. Outside the hall, Daniel took a deep breath. He felt something shift in the air, something lighter. The years of quiet tolerance for cruelty had finally cracked. He walked home with Marcus, the two of them side by side. She won't stop, Marcus said. People like that don't give up easily. Daniel nodded. Then we don't stop either. As they turned the corner, Lily was waiting on the porch. She held a sketchbook in her lap. Daddy, she called out, can we paint tomorrow? I want to draw a new boat. Daniel smiled. We'll build a better one first. The next few days were quiet. Karen had disappeared, at least from view. Her car stayed parked in her driveway, but the roses went untrimmed. The daily patrols around the lake? Gone. No complaints. No passive-aggressive HOA emails. It was as if a storm had passed, leaving behind stillness. Daniel took those days to focus on something that mattered far more than retribution, Lily. They began drawing the plans together, simple sketches at first. Crayon outlines, blue marker waves, and a bright yellow sun drawn smiling over a new version of the float. Can it have a roof this time? Lily asked. He nodded. Sure. We can build a little cover. Keep you shaded while you paint. And lights inside. Solar-powered ones. We'll make it magical. She beamed. Word must have spread. Because the following Saturday, Daniel was hammering the new wooden base of the float when a pickup truck pulled into his driveway. It was Marcus again, but he wasn't alone. 4 other men stepped out of their trucks. Some were from the local fire station. Others were neighbors Daniel had only waved at before. "Brought some hands," Marcus said. "Figured you could use the help." One of the neighbors, Tom, lifted a toolbox. "We saw what happened. Thought we'd pitch in." Daniel stood still for a second, unsure what to say. Then he stepped forward and shook each hand, one by one. "Thank you," he said softly. "Really." By midday, the backyard was alive with sound, saws, hammers, laughter. Someone set up a portable speaker and played soft acoustic music. Kids ran around with popsicles. Someone brought lemonade. Lily sat in the shade with her sketchbook, watching everything with wide, curious eyes. "Daddy," she whispered when he walked over, "are they building it for me?" He smiled and nodded. "For you. All of this, it's yours." She held up her sketch. It was now filled with color. The float had flowers painted on the side, a tiny flag waving on top. In the corner, she'd written one word, hope. It hit him like a wave. This wasn't just about a float. This was about reclaiming space, reclaiming joy, reclaiming peace after fear. And the neighborhood? It was finally acting like a neighborhood. Together. By sunset, the new float was almost complete. Stronger wood. A safer, balanced base. A small canopy. Solar-powered lights. One neighbor even donated waterproof cushions for the bench inside. As Daniel helped bolt the final panel into place, Lily wheeled herself to the edge of the dock, her eyes sparkling. "It's beautiful," she whispered. Daniel lifted her gently and helped her sit inside. She looked around, touched the painted side with her fingertips, and smiled. "This feels like flying." Daniel sat beside her. "It's your sky, sweetheart. You can paint whatever you want from here." People gathered around to take in the view. The sun dipped low behind the trees. Golden light stretched across the water. And on the dock, surrounded by people who once stood silent, now stood a little girl and her father, safe, whole, and stronger than ever. Suddenly, Mr. Beltran from the HOA stepped forward. In his hand, he held an envelope. "Daniel," he said, clearing his throat. "The board met again this morning. We've revised the HOA code." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "Oh." Beltran opened the envelope and read aloud. "Effective immediately, structures related to medical therapy, including floating platforms used for physical or emotional rehabilitation, are now exempt from HOA structural restrictions, provided they pose no safety risk." He looked up. "We didn't realize what this meant to your daughter. We were wrong. And we're sorry." Daniel took the paper slowly, folding it into his pocket. "Thank you," he said. "This means more than you know." As night fell, the solar lights flickered to life across the float. Lily clapped softly in awe. And from the shadows of her porch, Karen watched. Unseen by most, but visible to Daniel. He didn't wave. He didn't gloat. He simply held his daughter's hand as the lights shimmered gently around them, like stars on water. Letting her see what grace looks like. What resilience looks like. And what happens when a community stands up to cruelty, not with more cruelty, but with unity, healing, and unwavering love. A week later, life had shifted. Not in loud, dramatic ways, but in quiet, powerful ones. Daniel found himself waking up earlier. Not because of stress or worry, but because Lily had something new to show him every morning. A drawing. A poem. A new idea for the float. One morning, she called out from the porch while he made coffee. "Daddy, come look." He stepped outside and saw her pointing to the water. Overnight, someone had planted fresh lilies near the dock. Bright, white flowers bobbing gently on the surface. "Did you do that?" she asked. He shook his head. "No. But maybe someone who cares did." She grinned. "They're so pretty." She rolled forward in her wheelchair and looked down at her sketchpad. Then quietly added the new lilies into the picture she was working on. This one had their float, the painted flowers, the dock, and now, the real lilies growing just below. She titled it, Home. Daniel watched her color in the petals. He thought about everything they'd survived. The complaints. The letters. The threats. The fire. But he also thought about the firefighters who rushed to help. The neighbors who stepped up. The way a group of strangers became something closer to family when it really mattered. Later that day, a knock came at the door. It was Marcus. He held a thick brown envelope in one hand and a small toy fire truck in the other. "Thought Lily might like this," Marcus said with a grin. Inside the envelope were printed copies of the official charges: reckless endangerment, destruction of private property, and attempted arson. Karen had pleaded guilty to avoid a trial. "She's agreed to move," Marcus said quietly. "Somewhere across town. No more HOA roll. No more complaints." Daniel nodded slowly. "It's not about punishment anymore. I just want peace." Marcus smiled. "Then I think you've already won." That evening, they held a small gathering at the dock. Not a party, just a quiet celebration. Lily painted while the sun set. Her float now had little pots of flowers mounted on the rail. Someone had brought fairy lights that twinkled softly in the trees. There was music playing from a speaker nearby. And laughter. Always laughter. Mrs. Gallagher brought homemade pie. Tom brought sparklers for the kids. Even the HOA board came by, but this time without papers or rules. Just to be part of something human. At one point, someone asked Lily if she'd like to say a few words. She hesitated, shy at first, then stood carefully on the float with Daniel's help. She looked around. Her voice was soft, but clear. "I was scared," she said. "When the fire happened, I didn't understand why someone would hate something that made me happy." She paused. "But now I know. Not everyone will like what you build. But if you build it with love, the right people will help you fix it again." The group went silent. Then came soft applause. A few teary smiles. Daniel hugged her, holding her tightly. "You're amazing," he whispered. "No," she smiled. "We are." As the stars came out, the lake grew still again. Daniel sat alone for a while at the end of the dock, watching the water, the reflection of the lights, the peaceful boat Lily now called her floating garden. He thought about fire, what it destroys, yes, but also what it reveals. How heat strips things down to what they truly are. And how, after it all, something stronger can grow from the ashes. His job had always been to put out fires. But this was different. This was about building something no flame could ever touch.